Hello and welcome to this month's Coffee Break. I'm your host, as always, Andrew Miller, lead principal technologist. I'm really excited to be joined for the third time by Jack Hogan. Bonus prize or bonus gold star if you remember the times he was previously on, but it is the third time. We are going to be diving into, like it says there, data center fatigue. You need a cloud bridge, make the cloud fit your business. This matches so what we've talked about before, but there's going to be some new pieces in there, customer discussions, new announcements and advancements. As always, this is a series, a coffee break series. You can find the previous ones both here. We always send the follow-up slides. Real fast. You may see already Jack back here in May 2022. We call it the Goldilocks solution back then. And then as well back in June, public, private, hybrid, making the cloud fit your business. You can also find these as well on purestorage.com/events. That's the events page for all the different series that Pure runs, whether they're more technically focused, Coffee Break is kind of business and technology. You can find all the previous recordings there too as well. One quick advertisement. Previously, we've been highlighting that Accelerate was coming or had been here, and you can still find the keynotes online. Want to highlight that I'll actually be joining some of my peers and friends, frankly, Rob Ludeman, Rob Mossy, and Michael Worthy, for a little bit of a different kind of event. Let's be real, it's an online event, but it's meant to be a retirement party for Disc. So I was even thinking here, and we were talking, Jack, do I sing Time to Say Goodbye? Because I'm totally Andrew Bocelli, or is it more of a like a na 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 na, hey, say goodbye style? Either way, a little bit of roast. I'm looking at you to see if you want to break out in song, but it doesn't quite look like it. So
I'm not a singer. Let's just say that we'll keep we'll lose all of our audience here if we were to do that. But
right
I think it is a celebratory time, as Pure is really defining that Disc is no longer a primary medium that you should be thinking about storing your information on. So I think it is a happy time, happy celebration time there.
Mm-hmm. A lot of amazing work. There's even still stuff about how modern discs are like a 747 flying an inch above the ground across the country kind of thing. But it's still not good enough compared to Flash. Go back and listen to Pete Kirkpatrick last month, or Justin Emerson earlier. As noted, often some folks, maybe a good bit of you, are here for a coffee card. Thanks for being here, even for that. You will see that within the next week for attending. That is to the first 1,000 participants. That is only to folks inside the U.S. We can't send it to certain categories of people. Like, you're wonderful, appreciate you joining, but like there's laws and regulations around that. Okay. As always, I am your host. I'm not going to introduce myself every time. Customer for a while, partner for a while, et cetera. But thinking about this idea of data center fatigue and even kind of cloud, it took me back thinking about like I've been talking about cloud personally since we used VMware as a private cloud option to, check the box on the executive level. Hey, we need a cloud initiative. And actually back then, for the definition of cloud at the time, that wasn't a bad approach, in my humble opinion, to buy time to kind of figure out what made sense within the hype cycle, et cetera. Last time since we chatted, Jack, though, I think you've got a new title, a new role. Congratulations. I think. Mind updating us on the life of Jack a little bit?
Sure, happy to give a little perspective here. So as I've really run a lot of our technology strategy and how we're extending Pure's technology out of the data center. Most recently, I've taken over the responsibility to work with all of our hybrid, bare metal, edge, as well as hyperscale partnerships. So that means I'm working with our key partners in AWS and Azure and Equinix and Google. And so it really gives me that ability to have a very good point of view. Having been a former customer side CTO that really used all of those services, I now have that ability to help kind of define the strategies and the ways that we're bringing solutions, solving companies' business problems with our key partnerships and the technology integrations that we're doing there. So it is exciting to have that new or new title, but also new responsibility. I really still have that passion of being a cloud nerd, being a data wonk, understanding the value of data, and so just extending that capability, which I think we'll get into a little bit today.
That's what we're here for. So congratulations. What I'm hearing is you don't have nearly enough to do, and maybe not. Maybe it's the opposite. We will be next month, as always. This is actually going to be a first time here. Actually, this month is the first time. First time we've had a third time guest. Thank you, Jack. Next month, for the first time, we're actually going to have a guest who doesn't work for Pure, Hector Monseeger, formerly known as Sabu. He was the technical front man for the LulzSec Hacking Collective. We're going to wander through some of his history as a hacker and experience in his companies, what he sees in the current cybersecurity landscape, some discussion on resiliency architectures, and even what's coming in this area. So make sure to join us for this. This was actually based off of one of the best, if not the best, attended session at Accelerate. So diving in, data center fatigue, cloud bridge. We usually go to a poll to the agenda, but I think, Olivia, if you don't mind kicking off the first poll here, it felt right to do that here first. So in there, even just a little bit of a sense. And as always, we'll share the polls back so you can see the answers where you're interested in them to have a sense, because we've always got over 1,000 people on here. So do you have plans to move out of your data center? And then just even we're curious, so we can crunch the data, but at the same time figured we'd just ask how many people were here last year, 2 years ago. That even helps us know how much we should give some of a primer, because actually the agenda of what we were going to run through is, like it says there, the kind of the tagline at the top. We wanted to make sure to start with a little bit of a refresher, because bare metal as a service, BMAS, is an industry term, but it's a newer one. So I want to do a little bit of a refresher there. Well, right now, Jack, it looks like about 60% or so of the attendees attended the last two. So that's pretty cool to see. That means we may make that a little shorter. Anyway, kind of why should you care about this category? 6 states of the cloud journey. This is really from all the conversations you've been having with customers. Then flipping it into what's Pure doing in the space. As always, the first half is kind of agnostic. Second half is we start again what Pure is doing, what we're hearing from analysts and customers about cloud bridges, and then always a little bit of what's new. There should be new stuff going on. So I think I'll just leave the poll going here, so you can feel free to vote whenever you have a minute. But I think, Jack, let's even maybe start off with a little bit of a refresher, if that's all right. So bare metal as a service. It is still a newer term in the industry. Do you mind kind of doing a maybe for the 60%, 40% that weren't here before, I guess, a little bit of a walkthrough of what that is?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think it's important that in every approach that Pure takes, we always kind of start with the end in mind. What are we trying to deliver? And when you look at what you're trying to deliver as an IT operator or an IT leader, you always have to think about that full outcome that you're trying to deliver. And you have to think about the full stack. And when we talk about the full stack, that goes all the way from the venue of where you're located, through the how you're powering it and running it, how you're accessing it, what storage you have, and then all the way up into the data and consumer layer. But what bare metal as a service is really just that physical hardware layer. That layer that goes up into just that ability and to give you the hardware, but treating it. And what's the big difference between bare metal as a service and to difference than an IaaS service or an infrastructure as a service is that it's a physical, dedicated, single tenant environment. That ensures that all customers are not at the mercy of noisy neighbors. And you also have that ability to have physical assets to track. And this is important when you think about that level of control. They're your devices. You have full root level administrative access. So that the high security or regulated industries is really important to be able to have that, but also even non-regulated industries, that ability to operate just like you had your physical devices, your storage arrays or your compute servers or your network devices in a physical data center, you retain that root level capability. But what's really key on this is that automation to deliver cloud-like ease and speed. It delivers this, efficiently and flexibly, just like the cloud that you get when you spin up, say, a virtual machine in a hyperscaler. And so then customers can deploy that upstack solution, so that whatever software they want to bring, physical software licensing down to the core level, you're not having to refactor your applications if you want to move them from one place to another, and it gives you that control down to that physical CPU level, as well as the dedicated storage plans. In what we're doing with our partnership with Equinix and delivering the Pure Storage and Equinix Metal, customers are actually given that full device, and they can operate the Purity operating system directly on the device. They get full Pure One capability. And so it's important to note that this bare metal as a service is a new term, but introducing enterprise storage is even newer, and that's where we're really innovating in this.
I think in some cases how even like lift and shift over the years almost became a little bit of a dirty word, because we were like, it's not going to work out at the end. This helps solve for that, where you actually have the need to lift and shift in certain applications. Doesn't make sense to refactor, not possible even. but you can actually start to get, cloud-like ease and speed without getting stuck. And I've been here, living in a data center and having to get extra HVAC capacity and power, kind of things. Like, these things take a lot of time, and it's not really critical, except you can't do anything you want to do until you do that stuff. Oh, what have we been? I know last time we were here, we were telling some stories about customer and market adoption. Even some of it was related to some geopolitical events at the time, which was a pretty crazy corollary. But what have we been seeing since then, Jack, around kind of market customer adoption?
Well, so we're seeing growth in a number of areas in this, and we're seeing customer adoption. What's really probably the most interesting is that we're seeing growth in a global adoption sense. Substantial interest in mid-market and large enterprise, including Fortune 500 companies that are looking at Pure's bare metal as a service offerings to solve their needs. A lot of these companies are kind of trapped between the on-premises and public cloud and have restrictions there, and so this piece in the middle really solves that. We got customers deploying bare metal arrays in dozens of global metros across Asia Pacific, North America, Europe. And this is all with our partnership with Equinix and their digital services team and their specific product called Equinix Metal. This delivers that, as we see here on the slide here, that it's that full hardware stack. And bare metal is distinct and highly differentiated from really where people think about Equinix from the traditional sense. That this isn't their co-location site. This is actually, this is where Equinix has done a very good job of bringing that reputation of being being the largest hoster of companies that can go and get co-location space, or hyperscalers can get their xScale environments. This digital services unit is actually delivering this full stack managed hardware environment. And so what we're delivering with them, this is the most comprehensive bare metal as a service solution in the market. And we're the only Equinix operated storage offering, and it's directly integrated. So all of their control plane, that ability to go into their GUI, use their APIs, which allows for that easy and rapid transformations into the 6 states of the cloud adoption, which we'll cover here in a little bit. But those customers that are particularly with global presence are the ones that we're seeing the most adoption, where they can deploy once and easily replicate their physical infrastructure globally. Pure Storage and Equinix Metal is also available in all of the Equinix global regions. So Equinix has, I think, 250 global data centers. The Equinix Metal offering will be available in 30 by the end of the year. We're already in dozens of them and have active customers consuming. And this, what we're able to do here, and what's really kind of great to see, this is that ability to get that time to value that we've talked about in prior sessions. That implementation times, this is just taking a couple weeks, a couple months. And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later, about how we're even improving the time to delivery. It's important to note that Pure's entire storage catalog is available. So this is all based on our Evergreen//One catalog. So we offer block, file, object, high capacity, high performance. And so customers get to choose their SLA, and we're seeing customers decide which workloads need to go into which tiers. And of course, we're just continuing to deliver on Pure's market-leading technology. That speed and performance that we're known for, simplicity of operations, reducing total cost of ownership, allowing for continued innovation, all while now dramatically speeding up the time to delivery. And I think that's one of the big areas that we're seeing success. In the vertical areas that we're seeing success in healthcare and financial services, a lot of regulated industries, but also just enterprise companies who have legacy workloads that they're trapping them in that state one, which we'll talk about, but in their data centers. This allows a brand new way for them to look at this. And so, the platform appeals to so many different companies. It doesn't require that retraining or retooling of your skills. I think that's one of the biggest trends that we're seeing in the market, is that there's this gap between operating in a cloud and being an SRE, or being in a data center operator and being a traditional IT operations individual. This allows you that bridge right between the two.
So when you mentioned Evergreen//One in there, Pure and Evergreen//One even is a component. So there's a whole bunch of service offerings, like the different SLA tiers. There's different SLAs that are within Evergreen//One. We've introduced some new ones that Accelerate recently. All of that applies here, so back to that native capability, the SLAs you would expect. I also think it's nice, like this is we're starting with a very platform focused discussion. But then I also go into thinking about use cases, whether it's kind of data center fatigue. I don't know if that's a use case, but it feels like it. Disaster recovery, cloud adjacency is definitely one. So we're going to explore those more later, but we got to kind of start with a platform layer. The other piece I think is that I get asked regularly and even done webinars around this and presentations about, what is Pure's cloud strategy? You mentioned at the beginning, Jack, we have this very kind of practical approach, not like, let's do this grand thing that we must all fit in. But I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm pretty sure I shouldn't go down the whole cloud strategy path, or else we'll get too far going.
Well, we'll cover that. I think we're going to get to kind of how Pure is addressing this.
So let me I'll go ahead and end the first poll, and I'll share the results back just so everyone can see, and then we'll start at the second poll. But we'll do this quickly. So 60% of folks, you can see, planning to move out of your on-premises or colo data center. Maybe no. Actually, I realized we probably could have added an extra option there, Jack, of I already have, kind of thing, maybe. So that might be in the no. And then, a good healthy chunk, 60% here this last year, 54% here the 2 years ago. Olivia, do you mind launching the second poll here, if that's all right? And then we'll jump into the second section there.
Yeah, Andrew, I'll note something on that, on the results that we were just looking at. That's pretty consistent with what we see in different analyst data around how many people are really stuck to their data center or those moving out. It is the vast majority. We're also seeing the vast majority move towards subscription consumption. So those numbers match well. So I think our audience is probably pretty indicative of what, what's really going on in the market.
Mm-hmm. So questions here, kind of extending a little bit based on what we talked about. Curious about if you're migrating workloads to public cloud or service providers, as well as if you are going to the public cloud, what percentage is that? These are long, hard challenges. Inevitably, migration projects, actually any migration project, much less a public cloud migration project, they almost always take longer than we think, right? That's life. We'll leave this one open as we go into section 2. And I forgot, by the way, to highlight, we have some great folks on the line, Ian, Linda, Paul, and Ben. Please make sure to put questions into the Q&A throughout, as well as chat. I think Olivia, if I didn't highlight it earlier, already tossed in the link to the next month's where you can register, but we'll have some dedicated Q&A time at the end, but please don't be shy about putting them into the Zoom Q&A and we can get live answers. But as you've been talking, Jack, so some of a refresher, some of what we've been hearing and seeing about adoption, but even as you've been trying to kind of wrap your head around all the different things you're hearing from customers, I feel like you're gearing up to kind of, you're part CTO, you're part Pure executive, you're almost kind of part industry analyst a little bit here as far as kind of thinking through Pure's cloud strategy. So you mind kind of going through how we define it and what goes into it?
Yeah, I think first of all, that if I think about just my role within Pure as being that practical approach of like, what is the consumer mindset? But I also think that as Pure has always been an innovator, we've always really kind of been on the leading edge of change within the data center, where we introduced the all-flash data center. And as we then extended our Purity operating system into the public cloud environments, like we were kind of a first mover there, first mover in delivering subscription services. And so when we kind of approach a problem, we have to understand kind of what's in what are we dealing with? And so what I like to describe this is that companies can be in the 6 states of the cloud journey. And so what's important about these 6 states is that they really are not stages. They're not a linear progression from one side to the other. We recognize that companies have multiple different needs. But there's also a challenge when we start to talk about the word cloud. The word cloud is overused in a lot of ways, and it means different things to different people. And so now it's kind of become somewhat ubiquitous and confusing. And so we put together a little bit of a framework by which to explain how companies deploy their data and storage infrastructure in different ways across these different states. And so, companies are adjusting to the requirements, the business requirements to be in these different states. And we usually see that companies are often spanning multiple states. So they may have an on-premises data center in a state 1 environment, that owned or leased facility that's really there in their control. So they have to manage the whole facility. But they also may be in a state 5 at the same time where they've got a public cloud environment. And so they've got to manage these 2 things. And there's not necessarily easy translation between those 2 without understanding how different partner customers like Pure can have an impact. But as we see companies that, the trend has been there for a while now about moving out of a data center into a co-location facility. And so that offloads the burden of ownership of the facility, and maintenance of keeping up the power and the cooling and all the things that are required. I think about when I was on the customer side and had multiple different data centers, the ones that were the company owned, the ones that I had to manage, with my own direct AC vendors and power vendors, they were a real challenge. They were a real challenge to work with. And that's where, that state 1 and 2, we do a lot of deployment of pure arrays into those. That's where, we're innovating in those space. Now, in state 3, where you're going to be in that where bare metal fits, as we've kind of gotten deep into that, it's also where managed service providers are taking off that, that the management environment. So no longer are you actually having to physically manage your hardware, your space, the ownership and power. And so that state 3 is really an important area to recognize that it's kind of now bridging towards the that public cloud environment in state 5. And what we're starting to see a lot of now is this desire to be hybrid, or what we call near edge and multi-cloud. The term hybrid multi-cloud has now become a pretty big term. It's adopted in a lot of places. And what that really requires is those interconnections between the different states. That's why our partnership with Equinix, who's a global leader in interconnection, is actually one of the ways to bridge those. And then, of course, you can get all the way into that. I've talked about state 5. You can get into state 6. And state 6 is where we're seeing companies look at really the Internet of Things, where they're collecting data and information all the way at that far edge, the factory floor, the hospital setting, the cell tower, the car. This is where there's that need that data is created there. I also think about it, I was big into the content delivery network, world of pushing data from kind of a state 1 to a state 6. Now the world is reversed in terms of data is being created at the edge in that state 6 and has to be moved backwards. And so we like to have the conversations around what states are you in, not what stage, because it's not that linear progression, but it's really important to have that kind of grounding understanding of what are the different things available to my environment. And I think a lot of companies don't even necessarily step back and analyze themselves where they fit within these 6 states.
And when I look at this, I think a little bit of sometimes as an industry, we often see something new, and we have this presumption that everything will go there, whether it's cloud or digital transformation or whatever else. And then over time, we realize it becomes another compelling option within the list of options that we have. So it's not, we keep adding complexity and layers on, then we collapse those layers down. That's part of bare metal as a service, frankly. I also think here about this, the dynamics of, if you're on here listening and thinking about kind of both the seller and the team and organizational infrastructure ecosystem pieces, like, so you may be talking to one set of people, vendors, value-added resellers, integrators over here, maybe a totally different set over here. It may be one team over here that doesn't even know this team over here, or even maybe like them or get along. Hopefully not, but we see that sometimes, right? So there's the dynamics that aren't just like this kind of like states. It's an organizational dynamic and even a larger seller ecosystem too. So
it is very much an organizational dynamic. You start to see just line of business leaders who are deploying cloud workloads or creating that need to interconnect, and your core infrastructure teams don't know a lot about those workloads, and so the dynamics as you move into the different states, they're really important to be working with the right trusted advisors that can understand the importance of having a solid data platform strategy across the different states.
It's almost like people make things complex too, people, process, technology. Let's go back there too, right? I was thinking of that Venn diagram. Okay, I think we're going to close up this poll. Let me share it back out here, and so we can talk, because we're just about to jump into poll number 3, in case anyone is wondering. And I see some of the comments I appreciate from Timothy. The comments about the cloud journey. The goal is really to bring practical stuff that you can use and think about, because we think about this a lot. I mean, we're in the industry, right? But trying to think about it at a larger picture. So for poll number 2, I'll read it here, and then Jack, if there's anything that surprises you. So is your company primarily migrating workloads to public cloud or service providers? I think the lead there is 39% going to public cloud. 800 folks responding. That's big enough to be a decent sample set. But close behind, not migrating at all or going to service providers. So it's a top 3 easily. And then if you're going to public cloud, what percent of the task have you completed? And the lead there would be, we're just getting started, 34%, which is to me, and I'm going to be careful how I say this, like that's reality reflected here for all the discussion about cloud from analysts and companies over the years. There's still a lot left that may or may not make sense, and it's getting started. But anything stand out there to you, Jack?
Well, I think there's a couple things that stand out to me. First of all, this is pretty consistent with the conversations I have with CIOs and CTOs when I ask them about where they are in their cloud journey and their cloud strategy. And very few, very few, and in this case, 3% represent how many are 100% in the public cloud. That's consistent with what we hear. The other thing is we hear is like, even those that are at the 50 to 75% mark, which is a pretty low number in this audience. Some are a little bit further along in the companies I talk to. That's really interesting that this audience sees that, but it's also because the remaining portion is really hard to move. And that's where solutions like what we're doing with Equinix, with the Pure Storage on Equinix Metal and the bare metal capabilities. The most surprising thing in this is that we are starting to see adoption of primarily considering bare metal as a service. So 8%, it's a small overall number, but what's interesting in relation to that, if you ask this question in our first couple of sessions,
it's moving.
Like that's gone from 0, and it's a market awareness thing. And I think this matches some of the things, I'll get into it a little bit later, of where Gartner and IDC and other analysts are seeing like this is a new way to solve these problems. It's a new way to get from that 50 to 75% to 100%. If you can, when we start to think about the term cloud encompassing bare metal. So I think these are really strong numbers in terms of what we're seeing in the market, and the trends are all in the right direction from what we've seen.
So Olivia, if you don't mind kicking off poll number 3, and we'll leave that sitting here for a minute. So hopefully, I already got some commentary on the 6 states of cloud deployment. Maybe this is even a framework that you can use internally. We're curious to see, where you kind of put yourself in. And we tried to do this, I think, it's a multiple choice. So I believe you can select multiple of these. Make sure to comment in the chat if you can't. If not, just choose the one that fits you best. And then, what percent of global spend is currently in there. So we'll leave this up here as we always do. Going into section number 3. So first half, try and bring kind of industry knowledge, background around BMAS, et cetera, bare metal as a service, 6 states of the cloud journey. I think, Jack, let's shift into a little bit of just, what is Pure, unabashedly, what are we doing in this space? That's the reason we're talking about it. We have so much thoughts we can bring in the first half. So you mentioned earlier, about kind of cloud strategies as not being real or a little more fuzzy. Do you mind walking through ours a little bit in more detail?
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's go ahead and kind of look at how Pure is extending our technology into the cloud. So I mentioned earlier about the fact that we've extended the Purity operating system that's really completely revolutionized how data is stored. And we talked about the death of disk earlier. We've really solved the physical media problem inside of that state 1 and state 2 environment with the flash array and FlashBlade products. And what we've also done is we've then ported that technology and that simplicity and that history we have of innovating and simplifying the data center. We've extended our features of the Purity operating system and completely re-architected them. This isn't just a virtualized version of the Pure operating system. This is actually going down to the physical hardware layer of the primitives you get in the Azure cloud or in the AWS cloud, and we've re-architected, but it's the same exact feature sets. We've got a lot of innovation in this area. I will foreshadow a little bit here. You may want to check out some announcements we have coming out later this month around this particular area, because what we're doing with that cloud block store technology, which is the same operating system we have on premises and strong lineage and history of connecting into different hypervisors, I just say keep an eye on that. But the biggest challenges that we see for most storage vendors has been in like dealing with this states 3 and 4, like that middle spot. And this is where I call that, it's the big gap in the middle, right? And so how are we solving it? Well, we're solving it with our bare metal as a service strategy. And so we're working with the Equinix Digital Services Group. This allows us to, allows customers to really take advantage and control of the what they have on premises, not giving that control up, but be that bridge that bridge to the cloud. And so, you see that we've been teasing this bridge to the cloud, but it really delivers that bridge to deliver all that innovation and technology we do in the data center with the same level of flexibility and on-demand capabilities of the public cloud. And what's really important with the partnership that we have developed with Equinix is that with their global interconnections, their network connections, that ability to connect up to a public cloud in their native formats, their express routes and direct connects, while also creating a bridge back to your on-premises. So it allows you that proper stair step from on-prem through, from states 1 and 2 into a state 3 and 4 and ultimately 5, and allow that seamless data plane. That's really the so what. It opens up a huge amount of new capability in between the on-prem into the state 5 environment, and solves a lot of problems for customers.
So I think that is the foundation, if you will, on an architecture level. And sometimes when I'm kind of trying to put our custom architect hat back on, sometimes I would look at things through what are my technology building blocks, if you will, and how do they work and what they do and what are their limitations or their capabilities, right? Kind of thing. So this is that building block focused version. But then also, often flip around to use cases. And the beginning of the section said, customer and analyst perspective. So often at a kind of a customer level, we talk about use cases, or we should, because we should start with the business problem that we're solving for. So maybe let's go into use cases a little bit. Probably the most common one, if I've heard it one time, I've heard it 100 times, is can we use the cloud for, I don't know, disaster recovery maybe? Have you heard that a time or 1,000?
A couple. Yeah. And I think it is a primary use case. We're seeing adoption on this from the customer side. But what's really interesting about this is, disaster recovery, backup, business continuity, kind of put them all into a bit of the same category. Yeah. But what we can do very differently here with our partnership and capabilities in Equinix and what we're doing by placing physical arrays is that we can leverage Pure's native technology capabilities. So we're really well known for our data reduction technologies. We're really known for our stretch clustering or active cluster and active DR capabilities. And that's the beauty of how you can extend and protect your data by creating replicated copies into a bare metal environment like what we're doing with Equinix. And what that does is it really shrinks down the amount of capacity in the network pipe. It's pre-deduplicated. It's really only metadata rate of change that goes across that. So it really allows you to meet your RPOs and drive those RPOs down quite a bit. And it opens up a couple of really interesting capabilities, what I like to call the pilot light DR environment, or place your data there, don't pay for the ephemeral compute. It always became one of the bigger challenges I had to justify on my P&L spend budget when I was on the customer side is, why do I have a site that's sitting there just for an event that may never happen and I've got all this compute power? Well, when you use this kind of pilot light environment where you can place your data there, your data is permanent, and then instantaneously spin up the compute in a bare metal environment, like that's that ability to really have that kind of insurance policy. But we're also seeing customers use this for just straight up backup, putting different arrays and replicating the data to a third site. In many regulated industries, that's a requirement. And then that ability to rapidly recover too. But I think it's really one of the primary use cases we're seeing. A lot of strong adoption in this, which is not a surprise, Andrew, I think based on some of the conversations you have or I have as well with some of our customers.
The dream for a long time. I think you mentioned pilot light DR. I think I like that analogy better. The term I've used in the past is sometimes computeless DR, DR without the compute side. And this is just this extension of kind of, getting out of the data center, but, a step at a time in ways that make sense, because DR is often insurance policy. But then that expansion, because we're like, even next month, we're going to be talking more about security and ransomware and other stuff. So, this can be for backup sites. It can be a third site. Maybe even I'm going to cautiously embrace the use of the term air gap, where sometimes that being real, it's a network drawbridge that goes down and comes up. Let's be real about what an air gap is. This can sometimes fit into that strategy for a third site, potentially when you combine it with immutability and safe mode and the characteristics that make it more real than just buzzwordy, right? So that all fits in here really well. What if we're thinking about, though, the other piece there we see is just, that continuing evolution of people moving away from on-prem to colo to up the stack, which I think would take us to kind of both the primary and secondary scenario.
It does. And we're seeing this as another really strong use case. Companies that are just saying, I'm out of the data center business. I don't want to have my staff be spending time on raised tile, and racking and stacking devices. That is not necessary anymore with what we can do with this environment. So we're seeing a lot of companies move both their primary and backup environments into a metal-based environment. And so that ability to have the same level of physical capabilities, that allow you to do that and extract yourself from the data center and get out of the states 1 and 2 and into that state 3. We're also seeing this to companies that are establishing a global presence and expanding rapidly. I mentioned the 30 locations that this is available. This is all the major global metros where you can develop your architecture in one location and rapidly replicate it into any other location. So companies that are looking for a presence in another country, it's a great way for them to solve the problem.
What if we want something in between, though? Because we teased a little bit of the states around hybrid and multi-cloud, and I'm even thinking data gravity here. I think I'll let you keep going before I pull that thread a little more. So, what about a hybrid scenario?
Well, I say this is probably, especially as we look at kind of the industry trends, one of the most interesting places that we're seeing companies want to take control of their data, maintain it in an environment that they have full control in, but use the public cloud for its services and resources. And so what we call this our cloud connected storage model. This is true hybrid cloud use cases. We've actually got a number of solution areas here that we've developed. We have reference architectures for the EDA or semiconductor manufacturing space that need massive amounts of compute when they're doing their chip designs, but they don't need that all the time. And so they burst up. And we've done this in partnership with Azure and Equinix to allow flash blades that are physically sitting in an Equinix data center to instantly burst and have their storage endpoints literally mounted from an Equinix metal facility across the direct connects, and in the case with Azure, the express route environments, which allow them to rapidly expand their compute, finish their workloads, faster time to results, faster time to new chip design. We've also just recently released something in the genomic space, where with Illumina and their Dragon sequencers, where they're collecting data at the on site in a state 1, replicating their data into this state 3, and then allowing for expansive compute to run these massive genomic sequencing. It's an area we're seeing a tremendous amount of interest in, but allows you to kind of coexist. This is that example of kind of state 4 life, that ability to be fully hybrid while maintaining control.
I think you're saying, especially around, you said this a couple of times, it's little words on the slide about express route and direct connect. But there are options if you're in an Equinix and with metal, where that doesn't have to be metered per terabyte. Ingress to the public cloud is, almost always free. Egress is where, there's challenges, but there can actually be options there that are paid on a link basis, where you're buying a link, a 1 gig, a 10 gig link, et cetera. And that starts to get into the perspective of where you can have data gravity instead of working against you, working for you. You've got your data here. And like you're saying, that enables you to consume public cloud services and maybe even a little bit of public cloud arbitrage between different clouds as they lap each other in various ways with different capabilities that you may not even know that you need right now, but you might need a couple years later with a new business initiative.
Yeah, I think that that ability to have, Azure offers a full all-you-can-eat kind of connection, so it's like a cross-connect in a data center. Literally, it is. It's in many of these cases, these facilities are adjacent or under the same roof, and so that ability to just pipeline into the public cloud hyperscale capability, it's really an important place to ultimately place your data where you need it and allow that full customer choice and control.
So let's go ahead and we're just about done this section. If anyone's wondering, we're going to cheat a little bit past the 45-minute mark. Not too much, by the way, but section 4 is pretty short. But I'm going to go ahead and share the poll results back here because we went through a good bit and felt like it would be right to do. So looking at this, we've got it's all. I mean, there's a healthy distribution here, but I think the edge is the lowest, and then even commentary of what percent of the global IT spend is in the public cloud. I think I'll just turn it over to you, Jack, for commentary here.
Well, what I'm just doing some quick math on my little calculator here because I think what I want to kind of prove out here is that if we look at this, I think we proved out the companies are in multiple states. If you add up the total number of responses
more than 100
here,
yep,
we have 1.5 states. So that's kind of consistent. And I think that the variability of where your money's being spent in a single cloud, or that's an important thing. That the indication is that this is right in line with what we're seeing from most of the analyst reports of what percentage of their spend's being spent there. 30% is kind of right around where we're seeing that level in. But when you kind of average this all out, I think your mean's probably going to be right in that space.
In there. It's like we have a good cross section of folks attending coffee break. What do you know? Look at that. So, and I'm even curious if you've got like a classic TI calculator down there, Jack, or using your phone. Or,
it is TI. It is.
Wow. Well, like all the way back. Cool. This like takes you back to high school, kind of stuff. So.
It is.
No, we're not quite done section 3 because we covered some on customer standpoint. Actually, I'll stop the poll sharing here just so you can see the screen, hopefully. So covered section 3 from a customer standpoint, but there is perspective that we're getting from analysts as well, even a little more recently. So you mind, Jack, kind of going to what we're hearing analysts say about the cloud market and what you're seeing as the drivers for growth around bare metal as a service?
Yeah. So first of all, I think the real catalyst for change, what I'm calling the rocking and rolling 20s, right? There used to be the roaring 20s back in the 1900s. And like we've had some pretty big rock and rollings at the beginning of the 2020s. And so, we've seen a lot of major change, fast-paced change in the last 3 to 4 years. And so I think first, the pandemic and the need to immediately adapt to limited data access, data center access and rapidly adapt to business model changes has been one of the things that's defined the last 3 years. And so that's really kind of pushing and driving kind of this need towards bare metal. The second is that, there have been major economic uncertainties. So companies are really recognizing that they need to look at, sustained global recession, like how do they place their money? How do they control things? And so I think this is, really driving customers to take a hard look at their technology spends. They're recognizing that the public cloud actually has cost challenges. It can be very expensive. And so big term there right now is optimization. And in some cases, we see the word repatriation. I like to use rebalancing or optimizing costs, I think, but we're saying that the analysts are saying it, we're seeing it. It's very real. We're also seeing increased, analyst adoption and awareness of this bare metal space. Bare metal is now on the Gartner hype cycle. It's still early with a, 2 to 5 year time horizon. But, I think we're really seeing that this is, this ability to have data in different states is no longer becoming a buzzword. It's a reality. I mean, hybrid is a reality. And so that's what we're getting from the analysts. And we see this as a plus for Pure because, we've been always about taking our technology, our simplicity, our optimization, and our sustainability advantage and delivering that across all locations. We're certainly seeing this in key industries like, as I mentioned earlier, healthcare and financial services. But, with Pure's, consistent operating system, that data plane we talked about, as well as our Portworx capabilities, which we haven't really gotten into much here, but is available to be run on these bare metal platforms. Like, we've got a lot of reference architectures out there. We have that ability to extend that data plane from state 1 all the way to state 6 and allow customers to consume a very consistent experience and place their data where they need it.
I'm always a little careful about kind of unsolicited career advice. So folks joining, you're here for the technology, you're here for the business, but even there's sometimes like this is some of what you just mentioned, Jack. These are the trends that CIOs, CFOs, CEOs care about, even the 6 cloud states we talked about earlier. So if you're in an organization, depending on where you are, to me, this is the kind of stuff that is worth, even if you leave some of the pure names out of it, take discussing with your boss up the org chart, getting ahead of trends to look good in your organization in ways that benefit you and benefit your organization. I've thought this even goes back to when I was an admin, that there's two options in technology. You can either be the one driving change or have it driven upon you. I'm not here to make anyone's life uncomfortable or mess anyone's life up, but I know if those are the two options, I know which side I'd rather be on. I think there were one or two specific analyst reports that we saw coming out recently, though, I think, right?
Yeah, we work really closely with a couple of analyst firms, IDC, ESG Research, and we wanted to help kind of quantify, what the bare metal market is and its impact on the TCO. Like, what can bare metal as a service powered by Pure do? This is a report we'll make available to everyone attending today. But what it really shows is in the first year, you can actually save up to 85% in total cost of ownership. When you start to really factor in that ability to deliver on consumption and subscription-based, that ability to right-size your environment at any time. And so this is a really good report, that highlights that data sovereignty and compliance and, the increased data security of private network links and the requirements that are around that ability to have improved availability of your data protection and reduce risk of your overall operational layer. So we've got really a TCO deep white paper that we can give to all of our audience here today, that you can become that hero or that innovator, that person that's solving the problem for your company. We also have an IDC white paper that is really taking a look at the overall bare metal space. And how it's playing a crucial role in cloud computing future. I'll get into some of the quick highlights, but we're talking about the evolution that's happening in cloud computing. It's really blurring the lines in kind of on-premises, edge, public cloud. We've talked about that in the States. So this paper's got that perspective from IDC, and we're happy to make it available. Just send an email to BMAS, or Bare Metal as a Service, BMAAS @purestorage.com. We'll get you a free copy. And we also have an upcoming webinar that'll be coming out in fall that we're doing in partnership with IDC, that we'll also send you an invitation to, because I think if you follow up with that BMAS, you'll kind of track where this space is going, and you'll learn directly from the analysts on this.
I think for anyone who spends time in PowerPoint, you just need to appreciate this animation here. If you go back and play the recording frame by frame, you'll actually see that Jack actually screenshotted, I think, each one of those to pop up. So you can enjoy that for your PowerPoint kung fu skills later. But we're into the last section, and you're feeling like, man, is there any time left? Well, there is, because actually what's new is super impactful, but also actually pretty straightforward. So we're like, it was something that we wanted to make sure to highlight. We didn't need a lot of time. So Jack, you mind hitting on the two major things here?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we've recognized that there's so much interest in this space, and it's really growing, that we've got a promotion that we're working directly now with Equinix Metal. You can get 3 months free with a 12-month commitment. So that means you can go and experience it, try it. This is actually something that is easily available for every one of you online to go get signed up and experience what you can do in a bare metal environment. It also gives you that ramp time, and we can follow up and be able to provide you kind of all of the ins and outs, and work very closely with our partners in Equinix and drive change. Allow you to become those innovators of change. We have one other announcement, which is, I talked earlier about, we're delivering now inside of a couple of weeks, immediate availability of arrays. So we're talking about pre-stocking and immediate access to arrays in the top 5 markets that we're seeing interest around the globe. We intend to scale this as we go. That'll be coming out later this month. So if you're interested in actually trying this, we will follow up with you, get you connected with our friends at Equinix, and really allow you to experience it, see demos, be able to understand what's entailed. Just follow up with Equinix @purestorage.com, and we'll create that connection for you.
Literally see something in the chat. I think Ben is typing a good answer to someone asking, how do I demo? And literally, as you were saying that on the screen. So look at that, So hopefully, as always, our goal is to bring you insight, knowledge, information as it relates to Pure, but also as it relates to larger industry. Jack, we covered a huge amount, as we always do. Thank you so much for being a great guest, especially for your PowerPoint Kung Fu skills. I think they exceed mine in various ways. We both probably spend more time in PowerPoint than we should, but hey, such is life. Such is life.
Hey,
Any
always
final
fun
thoughts?
to be with you.
Yeah, bring us home.
Always fun to be with you, Andrew. I think these sessions are great. I think that we love being able to use this venue to explain to the audience really how Pure is continuing to innovate across these 6 states, really deliver new outcomes for companies, and really help solve real business challenges. It's not just about the technology. It's mostly about how businesses are taking advantage of Pure's technology and creating that sustainable advantage.
Thank you. So, in case you stayed around for the drawing, hopefully you stayed around for the knowledge and the content, and the amazing backgrounds we both have. But if you mainly stayed around for the drawing, it is for a Ember 12-ounce travel mug, retail value around $130. So maybe this one is actually higher. It's the kind you can control with your phone. Not only is it kind of fun and cool, but it's actually practically useful depending on the types of drinks that you like. So the winner is Joseph S. from Washington. We will reach out to you in case you're wondering if we make this up. Actually, I was at a Field EBC executive briefing in Columbus, Ohio, a couple months back. I actually met a gentleman at a customer who was the winner of this. So we don't make it up. Thank you, Joseph S., for attending, and for everyone attending. We are now, in case you're wondering, in case you were hanging around for the gift card, we are done, but we're going to stay around for a little bit, at least till the top of the hour. I want to make sure to highlight, there's 3 things here. One, you want to make sure to join us next month, where we'll have ransomware and resiliency architectures, a former hacker's perspective, Hector, formerly known as Sabu, going through his history, cybersecurity landscape, resiliency architectures, what's coming. This is, for better or worse, always an important, critical, hot, you insert the word, it's a super relevant topic. Second, we did actually want to do one final poll before we go to Q&A. So if you don't mind launching that, Olivia. This is where we continue to evolve the tools and the process and the way that we approach Coffee Break. This is, if I'm not mistaken, month 30. No plans of stopping, right? Because this has been, you keep attending, and we appreciate that. There's been value for you. There's been value for Pure. It's a win-win scenario. But we think sometimes about webinar platforms to use, what's preferred webinar platform, how do you like to attend, whether, what kind of device, and then even as well, actually, I thought there was one other question, and of what device do you actually use most often during Coffee Break? So I'll just leave that sitting up there, because we wanted to gather some insight from you as far as, what makes sense and what you prefer, or not even, kind of thing, because there's multiple options out there. With that, we do have a few minutes left, Jack. I think I'm gonna, just because this is where we let our hair down, kind of, sort of, if that was possible. I feel like people can comment in the chat if I make that joke every month. I'm honestly not sure, but it's what I think of. It's a little more relaxed. So we are done, but I think Ben and Paul and Ian have been doing a phenomenal job, and I see it's like 34 answered Q&A. Some of them were just, people being polite and saying hi, which is always awesome. But I think I'm going to go through here and cherry pick a couple to toss back to you, Jack, if that's all right.
Yeah, please do. I'm reviewing some of these questions. Good questions coming in. I love an engaged audience. I think it's indicative of the following you've created, Andrew, and the great information that I think that we're delivering here each month.
So there's one from Gary. I'm going to embrace the question and expand it a little bit. So, have you seen any customers looking to deploy traditionally on-prem based voice or contact center apps, or even maybe I'm going to extrapolate it to apps that traditionally would be more challenging to run anywhere other than on-prem, maybe, kind of thing? So if you don't mind kind of wandering around that a little bit, Jack.
Yeah, well, I'd say, first of all, because you have physical servers and physical arrays, the possibilities are pretty strong. And so we are seeing companies that are taking really bespoke applications or bespoke use cases, like call center communications. The great news that working with Equinix as a partner in this, that you can create really a multiple state environment where you can house, whether it be your UC proprietary systems that can be interconnected and run compute and storage from Equinix Metal environment. And so we do see that's hybrid away from the cloud. So that's my hybrid towards the on-prem. And that's the beauty of this, that ability to create that kind of bi-directional bridge and really solve the problems that we've talked about today, which is how do I extract myself from a data center while maintaining the control?
Question from William, which I actually really kind of like. It kind of flips a little bit of flips some ideas on their head a little bit. So he asked, beside compute being scaled into the cloud, is it also possible for storage from BMAS, the bare metal as a service environment? Because we talk about how it's single tenanted and root access, et cetera, kind of thing. Well, not root access, the pure device, but your single tenant access. Can you leverage that from storage from BMAS to the cloud if needed?
Yeah, I think that third use case we got into there that's exactly what we're doing. And we've got a couple of solution briefs that we could provide, William, to kind of demonstrate that we actually are we're talking about volumes that are mounting from arrays in the Equinix Metal environment directly mounted to the VM in the VM servers that run in the hyperscalers. In the case that the case studies we've done or the solution briefs we've done have been focused primarily on high performance workloads, but it's available in all flavors of the Evergreen One line. So even low cost, high capacity systems like what we're doing with our UDR, Unified Data Repository tier, are available. So that ability to place your data at the edge and then consume it or store it, it's all within this use case here. And it's absolutely something we're seeing a lot of interest. And I mentioned the rebalancing or repatriation, people use the term. It's a use case to solve that problem for sure.
I think with that, we are 2 minutes left. We were both looking at the Q&A. I mean, truly, Ian and Ben and Olivia, everyone did a great job of answering all the questions. Are there any others that you see there that you want to highlight, Jack? Or you can read your own questions and answer. Yeah, you're fully capable there too. But
yeah, no, I think we've answered. Listen, I think Ian and Ben have been awesome, and they've answered really in depth. So those that are reviewing the Q&A, take a look at those, because I think there's some great questions, great answers. I think there was one maybe that we could just one last one, which is Brielle asked how does bare metal as a service differ from traditional hosting in terms of providing a root level administrative access and delivering upstack solutions. Basically, if you go to a traditional MSP, you don't get that root level. If you go to a cloud hyperscaler, you don't get that root level. And so that control that in many cases are either requirements for your industry you're in, or is a preference from your security stance, that's a big differentiation from BMAS, from an IaaS environment, or other ways that you might be consuming a managed service. Most managed services don't provide that level of full control of the hardware.
That is all these other downstream impacts, like can I replicate in? How does that work? Is there isolation? Is there regulatory questions? A lot of that stuff, just complexity potentially just goes away based on the bare metal as a service kind of architectural foundation.
Exactly.
Awesome. I think with that, I'm going to do one last highlight. Make sure to join us next month. Olivia put the link in the chat. And I think we are good. Jack, thank you as always for being a great guest. Look forward to seeing everyone next month. Hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining for Pure Storage Coffee Break on behalf of the Coffee Break team. Have a great day.